A warm welcome to today's talk. It's Wednesday evening, the 2nd of June. I want to look at vaccination disparities across the world today and some of the implications of that, and then we'll see how we go for time. I've got some other interesting things as well. Now, I want to start off with a few graphics. So here we see the new daily confirmed COVID-19 cases per million. So we see Ireland has been fairly flat, but Canada's come down nicely as the vaccination's gone up. The United States, the numbers are going down. The United Kingdom, unfortunately, they're going up. Now, are we worried about this increase in the United Kingdom? Well, clearly to an extent. So partly it's new variants that we're supposed to call alpha, beta, gamma, delta now. I'm not quite sure which it is, but the one that first arose in India. The World Health Organization come out with these dictates and the rest of the world is supposed to follow on, but I haven't learned them yet. So I'm having to say the variant that first arose in India at the moment. But I think perhaps the main thing causing the new cases in the UK is the increased social mixing and the indoor mixing. So we did expect an increase in cases, but thankfully we're not seeing a significant increase in people getting sick, hospitalisations and deaths, which is reassuring because the vaccine's broken this link between cases and deaths. And it's still fairly patchy around the country. Some areas there's quite a few cases, other areas there's less cases. But overall, the vaccination programme is accelerating now, and the politicians are optimistic at the moment that what they're saying is they see nothing in the data that means we're not going to open up on the 21st of June. So that still looks like the position. The United States, to be quite honest, has been fortunate that the new variants didn't seem to get a hold. Let's hope it stays that way as the cases go down. And in the United States now, a lot of life has returned to normal from everything that I hear about it in many areas, but it's not quite over yet. We've still got a little bit of a way to go, especially because the vaccination rates in the States have dropped. So this is vaccine doses administered per 100 people. So this is 7-day rolling average of the vaccine. So we see that the daily uptake in the States has gone down. There's still a lot of vaccines being given, but the daily rate has gone down. Australia starting to go up a little bit. New Zealand. Ireland, there's been dropouts of data, largely because of this cyber attack. It's appalling that there's been this terrible cyber attack on the health services in Ireland. And a lot of data's been delayed and all sorts of problems due to cyber attack. United Kingdom, slightly down, but basically the vaccination programme is going well. In Canada, it's going well, as we saw the reduction in cases in Canada. And that's, of course, reflected in deaths, but deaths are falling pretty slowly, actually. Now, the deaths in the States, and this is per capita, this is adjusted per population, fairly flat, still higher than Canada. The United Kingdom here, and I think again this is data dropout in Ireland, so I don't think it's unfortunately as low as that, the death rate in Ireland. COVID vaccine doses administered per 100 people. Some examples: Cambodia, Thailand, Taiwan, Vietnam. Now, I've mentioned these countries particularly because it seems ironic that we're going to talk about United States international vaccine distribution. But when you think about the amount of money the United States has spent in Vietnam and Cambodia in the past, this intervention wouldn't cost that much. Thailand is stepping up vaccination now and they're starting to develop their own vaccine, but still slow. Taiwan, really surprised there's been such a slow vaccine rollout in Taiwan because Taiwan's a sophisticated country. And Vietnam at the moment, although the cases are very low, we have looked at this new Vietnamese variant. But the thing to remember is these countries here, particularly these ones, so Cambodia, Thailand, Taiwan, Vietnam, for example, they haven't had very substantial waves at all so far. So that means if the population there is not exposed to the virus, they don't have any immunity. If they're not exposed to the vaccine, they don't have immunity. That means these populations in Taiwan, Vietnam, Cambodia are as vulnerable to COVID-19 as we were before we had our extremely difficult waves in the United Kingdom, the United States. This is why it's so important to get the vaccine to these people, because they've no immunity at all. They're completely naive to the virus, just as we were really in January 2020. So big disparity there, obviously. And then when we look at the Americas, again, you see the United States, then Brazil, Argentina, Mexico, Colombia, Bolivia, Ecuador, Peru, Venezuela, again, probably data dropouts there. But some AstraZeneca vaccine being produced in Brazil, but not as much as we'd hoped. So we see a big disparity. And Russian and Chinese vaccines are somewhat filling these gaps. And of course, it's impossible to ignore the geopolitical implications of that, which is partly what we're talking about today, although not politics, as I don't try not to do politics. Right, World Health Organization approved the Sinovac vaccine, the one called CoronaVac. So that's just been approved yesterday, I think, emergency use by the World Health Organization. They've currently the Chinese have directly sent about 4 million doses to Cambodia. And again, basically virtually all the vaccines in Cambodia are from China. Now this Sinovac, we haven't looked at this one very much, but it's an inactivated vaccine. What this means is they've grown up huge amounts of the virus, basically killed the virus, and then they inject the whole virus. It's the old-fashioned approach to making vaccines. Now the viruses, of course, only grow inside cells. They are obligate intracellular parasites, so they're grown in cell cultures, and what they've done is these are monkey kidney cells. Now, fortunately, they don't have to keep killing monkeys for this. What they do is they take some monkey kidney cells and they brew them up in huge vats of the same type of cell, and then the virus can infect the cells, and then they can harvest the viruses. So both of the Chinese inactivated vaccines are actually brewed up in vats containing monkey kidney cells, and then they kill it with this stuff called Beta-propiolactone. So that basically kills the virus, but without destroying it stops it from replicating at least, and so it's replication deficient. But the proteins of the virus remain intact. They then act as antigens, which the body recognises and makes antibodies in response. It's 2 doses, it's kept at low temperature. It's now part of the COVAX programme, but there's not any deals on that yet. The Cambodia is a direct supply from China directly to Cambodia. Sinovac have got the capacity to make 2 billion doses of vaccines per year, which of course can have huge beneficial effects in many of these countries, especially the countries around about Asia. And African countries, of course, and South America, basically everywhere. They're supplying this around the world. And again, the West cannot ignore the implications of this. At least you'd think they couldn't ignore the implications of this. Phase 3 data on this vaccine, 51 to 91% efficiency, depending on how the trials were conducted. Turkey reported an efficacy of 91.25%. Brazil reported 83.7% in... Oh no, Brazil was low, 51% in preventing any sort of infection, but 83.7% efficient in preventing medical treatments, and it seemed to prevent all deaths, which of course is arguably the most important thing. So what we see is the same position with the other vaccines, that it prevents infection to some extent, prevents serious disease more, and prevents deaths even more. So that's good. So study on Indonesian healthcare workers, 120,000 of them, 94% effective at preventing symptomatic illness. So this sounds pretty good. And when I first heard about the way these vaccines were produced, of course, we didn't have any adenovirus vector vaccines 2-3 years ago. We didn't have any messenger RNA vaccines 2-3 years ago. And using the whole antigen, I actually thought that was quite a good idea at the time, and it does appear to be working. So Sinopharm is the other Chinese one. So that was... Remember, it gets a bit confusing. This that was Sinovac, that's just been approved. Sinopharm was already improved. It's another inactivated one brewed up on monkey kidney cells. That was approved by the WHO back in April. And the World Health Organization have also approved Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca, Johnson & Johnson. Now, moving on to think about the distributions of vaccines. Now, United States, Antony Blinken, Secretary of State, he says there's going to be global distribution of American vaccine soon. Okay, I'm not sure what that means. Probably starting with Latin America, might be near the top of the list. China has so far distributed 165 million doses of vaccine to Latin America and the Caribbean. Now, this is on the doorstep of the United States of America. And the economists and politicians and people like that amongst you will realise that this has significant implications for the future. Sometime in the next 2 weeks, we will be announcing the process by which we will distribute these vaccines. So that's Antony Blinken saying that, direct quote. President Biden has promised 80 million global doses by the end of June. But I don't think the states are anywhere near that, so they're going to have to step up quite a bit. So it looks like the United States does have good intentions here. But quite honestly, with the exception of the Oxford-AstraZeneca, the Western countries have somewhat missed the gun compared to the Russians and the Chinese on this. And as I say, many of you will realise the implications of that, and we really need to get going on that. Because we want as many poorer people around the world to be vaccinated as possible, of course, because many people are still naive to this disease, therefore at risk. But the implications of it, of course, are wider. Now, in China itself, vaccination programme in China actually started off fairly slow. But on the 31st of May, that's 3 days ago, they gave out 22.3 million doses of vaccine in the same day. They've given out 660 million so far, so the vaccine programme is greatly accelerating. Vaccination programme got off to a slow start but has rapidly picked up pace. China is now 6 times faster than the US peak in vaccination, so they are really getting their act together, but strict border controls are still in place, so no complacency yet in China. So why did China have such a slow start? Probably partly because they were sending vaccines around the world. That could be part of it. And I'll leave you to decide why that is the case. From my point of view, I'm pleased because it's helping many poor people around the world who wouldn't otherwise have got vaccinated. So with the exception of Oxford-AstraZeneca, and of course Oxford University put it as part of the clause for the deal with AstraZeneca that the vaccine would be cheap. It's about $3 for global distribution. Other vaccine companies need to step up. And of course the Oxford-AstraZeneca vaccine is being produced around the world, whereas other US vaccines, that they're not sharing the production technology around the world at the moment. North Korea. Now, I'm pleased to tell you that due to the glorious leadership in North Korea, they have no cases of COVID-19 at all. So there's no problem. Must be great to have glorious leadership, mustn't it? Must be fantastic. Whereas we have the politicians that we're stuck with. Whereas in North Korea, they have glorious leaders and no disease at all. But of course, the reality is that we grieve deeply for the poor people of North Korea. It's just an appalling, idolatrous situation there, and we know that many poor people are suffering massively already. And a lot of rumours came out at the start of last year. There was a lot of cases in North Korea, but of course we don't really know. But we do know that the medical facilities are very, very limited for the vast majority of the population, apart from a few thousand elites at the top. Most people have very little medical care when they're sick. And certainly if there was a large amount of people all at once with COVID-19, the death rate would be unfortunately quite high, if I get the right one. There we go. So now South Korea, COVAX delivery. Now there's lots of COVAX vaccines in South Korea, but they haven't been able to get them in the north yet. They've got 2 million doses of Oxford-AstraZeneca ready to go to protect the people of North Korea, but they haven't got them yet. Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunisation, which is largely responsible for the COVAX, is working on it. So I'm expecting they will get there fairly soon. So basically what we're saying is there's a big disparity in global vaccinations. Russia and China have stepped up And with the exception of the Oxford AstraZeneca, other countries haven't. And in the States, they're still getting their act together. And indeed, in terms of the extra vaccines we're going to be making in the UK, we haven't got our act together yet either. And Europe most certainly hasn't, because they're way behind on vaccinating their own population. So marks out of 10 for Western performance in global vaccine distribution so far. Think of a number between 1 and 10. I'll leave that to you. Now, other things that are interesting, I was looking at biosecurity things, and I've come across this report from the Centre for Long-Term Resilience. So I'll put the link there for you to have a look at that. Really quite interesting report. You can download the whole thing there. So basically what it's saying is that there's some significant risk to humanity, and another pandemic and viral infection is one of them. So what they do is, this Centre for Long-Term Resilience, it's a non-profit making company as far as I know, based in the UK. Academics, previous government advisors. And the report's called a Futureproof Report. Now they talk about extreme risks, which are bad, like this pandemic. Global catastrophic risks, which would kill 10% of the world's population, of existential risks, which would threaten humanity or the nature of human society as it is. So it sounds quite melodramatic, but these are the risks that they put forward. Biosecurity is the first one that they put forward. Now, biosecurity, this could be a deliberate biological weapons attack with a weapons grade virus. That's possible. It could be another natural pandemic, or it could be a natural pandemic, or it could be artificial lab released pandemic, or it could be a pandemic caused by the massive monoculture agriculture we have in Western countries, with massive food production, with animals living in completely unnatural situations and not genetically diverse. Or it could be a pandemic which rose from animal interactions in Asia, particularly the exploitation of wild animals in Asia and Africa. So all these risks are there. Even bacterial warfare is not impossible. And if we do know that scientists, it's almost certain that viruses have been made that are weapons grade. Let's just leave it at that. We don't know too much about it, but every major country's got its own biological warfare facility. In the UK, it's at Porton Down. What's there, of course, we don't know. So biosecurity is a risk. Remember, 1348, the Black Death, bubonic plague, killed about 40-50% of the European population, and a new virus could do the same. Especially, certainly a weapons-grade virus could do the same. So this is a major risk, but there's going to be more pandemics, that's for sure. That's one reason we're stepping up vaccine production in the UK. From memory, I think in the UK we're going to make 700 million doses of vaccine next year. Let's hope that gets distributed all around the world. But it's also good to be able to have a facility where you can make vaccines quickly. The other risk they see is artificial intelligence, which I don't know much about, but tell me about it by all means. They see that as a particular risk. Climate change, of course, nuclear security, these are well known and somewhat accounted for. Okay, we're not there yet, but there could be nuclear war. We've come close a few times since 1945, unfortunately. But they're kind of known about. But the biosecurity, they say, isn't known about, and the artificial intelligence threat, they say, isn't known about. So that's what they think. So biosecurity, they're talking about DNA synthesis machines, gene editing and gain-of-function research. So these DNA synthesis machines, you can literally make any DNA molecule you want to code for anything. You can just put the A, T, C, G bases together in the order you want. So they're saying that these DNA synthesizing machines need to be regulated to stop people making dangerous DNA that could code for dangerous pathogens. But there again, you could regulate it in the UK. But what about France? What about Germany? What about the United States? What about China? What about Russia? What about every country in the world that's probably got these machines now? So basically, these DNA synthesizing machines, you can make a stretch of DNA to basically make any protein that you want, encode that into a virus such as an adenovirus vector, which of course is what we do for the vaccines, and it should make that protein. But there are dangers to that as well. Gene editing, again, a technology that's not well understood, but recombinations of genes that haven't been there in natural evolutionary processes. And of course, what people are talking about now, gain-of-function research. Now, this gain-of-function research is taking wild viruses, making them more transmissible, making them able to infect human cells so they can be studied. But clearly, the idea that you take a wild virus, improve its function so it's capable of infecting human cells, has got obvious risks. And in the next 3 months, we might find out whether that was at least in part the cause of this pandemic, as Mr. Biden is expecting his report in that within that 90-day time frame that we announced recently, or whether he's going to get it or not, we don't know. So interesting threats from future pandemics. If from this pandemic we've learned that the next pandemic could be a lot worse and we prepare for it, then we could save, well, how many people are there on the planet? 7 billion. So, another virus could have killed half the population of the planet. This is not melodrama. 3 or 4 billion people could die in a future pandemic. And if we're prepared for that, then that's a good thing. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is, I told you before that I wrote to my Member of Parliament saying I'm concerned about sticking needles in, injecting the vaccine and not drawing back because there's a small risk of inadvertent intravascular administration. And I think that's a potential risk, whether it's an mRNA vaccine, which could potentially cause inflammatory conditions, potentially myocarditis, or whether it's an adenovirus vector vaccine, in which case we know there's a risk of thrombocytopenia and thrombosis. Now, it turns out this risk was known about back in 2006. Now, we have looked at previous papers about this, but this is interesting. So this paper is a peer-reviewed paper from the journal Blood from 2006, and it knew about thrombocytopenia in mice. So here they injected mice with adenovirus, and thrombocytopenia has been consistently reported following the administration of adenovirus gene transfer vectors. Direct quote from the paper. These words were written in 2006. So this risk has been known about since then. And all mice received virus through a single tail vein injection. It was intravenous injection. Now, of course, these injections are supposed to be, the vaccine are supposed to be intramuscular. But in the muscle, so imagine that's the muscle there, there's a risk that in the muscle there's a blood vessel. Now, in the deltoid muscle there shouldn't be any, but if you stick your needle in there, and it goes into the blood vessel by mistake, then in 1 in 5,000 or 1 in 10,000, we don't really know, it could be given intravenously, and that could cause these side effects, because we know in mice that injecting in adenovirus gene vector, transfer gene vectors into mice intravenously does cause thrombocytopenia and thrombosis. So this is not theoretical, really, it's a known risk. And my MP passed the letter on to Matt Hancock. My MP will get back to me as soon as he hears from Matt Hancock, Secretary of State for Health in the UK, but of course he hasn't heard back. And the World Health Organization have said nothing about this either. So this really annoying variable that could so easily be eliminated by sticking in the needle, drawing back to make sure you're not in a vessel, and then injecting. And that would shut me up. Not that that matters, but what matters is that this is a potential risk. Denmark, of course, changed their regulations. So there we go, a few things for Western countries to think about, all with really pretty massive implications, I think. So let's hope that Western governments around the world, corporate concerns around the world, are moved by geopolitical necessity, if not by humanitarian imperative. Thanks for watching.